Howdy, everybody, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And today we have Miles Arbour back on the podcast for the third time. True to fashion, Miles wanted to introduce himself, so let me just get the housekeeping out of the way, and then we can kick it over to Miles Arbour and I for our conversation. First off, I wanted to thank our newest patron. Only one this week. Slow week for the patrons. This whole show is made possible by our newest patron, David George. Thank you so much, David, for stepping up to be a sustaining member of the podcast. And like I did last week, I wanted to go back in the archives and see who was our second longest supporting patron. We have in second place Paul Drees. And in third place, our guest today, Miles Arbour. Miles Arbour has been a patron of the Bikes for Death podcast all the way since April 11th, 2019. So I thought that was kind of cool. Appreciate all the support from patrons. And if you would like to support this show, you can find out how over at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. Now, please enjoy some quick conversations that I had with Ren Sports and Ruby Coffee Roasters. Okay, everybody, we got Cameron Sanders back on the podcast to talk about forks again. Dude, the Beefcake fork is available for pre-order over on your website right now, and nobody knows this fork better than you. You've really put it through its paces. So what do you want to tell people about the Beefcake?
This fork is definitely designed for bike packing and expedition cycling from ground up. You know, there's a lot of components we fit to go bike packing, but the Beefcake is a fork that we designed specifically for bike packing. Everything from beginning to end had a specific purpose that's going out and riding for a really long time. This is a gravel fork. What makes a gravel fork is its axle to crown. Gravel forks are going to have a lot shorter axle to crown. So in order to keep your gravel bike like a gravel bike, you know, we have to keep that at a certain height. But one of the huge limitations out there for gravel forks is their really small tire clearance. When we put this fork together, we wanted a mid-fat, capable gravel bike fork that had lots of mud clearance. After we tested this fork at the factory, we put it on a shake machine and shake it until it falls apart. We literally strapped it down with more weight than you'd ever carry on a fork and just shook it until it exploded. We not only industry standard tested this fork, but we tested it with loaded gear. Once that was done, we loaded this fork up and did a 1,000-mile bikepacking trip in Eastern Oregon, testing out this fork, fully loaded. I had camera gear. Leigh had our tent and food set up. She was testing the rack capabilities on this fork, as well as the side blades, because we have a lot of Bottle Boss mounts all up and down the Beefcake fork. The retail price is $500. Bikes or Death listeners, your discount code still works on this fork. Pre-order is now open on the website, and we start shipping forks next month, just in time for winter if you wanted to upgrade to some studded tires on your gravel bike. And the first 100 Beefcake forks that are sold, you get a Beefcake beanie, which is embroidered with the Beefcake logo, which if you haven't seen it, head over to the website and check it out. It's pretty rad.
Awesome, dude. Well stated as always, man. You're good at articulating all those finer points pretty succinctly, I will say. But I want one of those beanies too. They look good. But thanks for coming on the show, and we will chat with you again sometime soon, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. You have a good one.
All right, everybody. We got Jesse back from Ruby Coffee to talk to us. And today, Jesse, I was interested to know where coffee comes from and why it tastes different from different parts of the world, and then maybe some of the coffee offerings that y'all have there at Ruby.
Yeah, for sure. Coffee comes from a fruit tree, which means that it is going to be pretty seasonal. The thing I like to compare it to is apples. So if you go to the grocery store, you'll see 7 different varieties of apples from different countries, sometimes Washington, sometimes New Zealand, sometimes you get apples from Michigan. Coffee's kind of the same way. Depending on sort of where the tree is growing, soil that's available in that region, the type of weather that region gets, it affects how the trees are developing, but then there's also just tons of different varieties of coffee. We break down coffee in 3 major regions. There's Central America, South America, and then East Africa. In those regions, you can kind of expect different overall flavor categories. And then individual coffees from individual countries have more specific flavor profiles. So coffees from Central America are usually pretty balanced, maybe a little bit chocolatey. Coffees from South America tend to have a lot of body and some nice bright fruit flavors. And then coffees from East Africa, we usually expect them to be a little bit brighter, maybe more citrusy. So right now on our menu, we have coffees from Colombia that we think are pretty bright and pretty well-rounded. We've got coffees from El Salvador that we think are pretty chocolatey and really balanced. And then we also have a couple coffees from Ethiopia that we think are pretty sort of fruit-forward, citrusy, and maybe even a little bit floral.
It almost seems like you need to just kind of go and try some different ones from different regions and just see what you prefer.
Yeah, and I think especially too, you can have coffees from El Salvador and then coffees even from Guatemala right next door and find a lot of unique differences, but find that the overall flavor profiles might be similar. So if you like a coffee from Colombia, you might like coffees from Peru. If you like a coffee from Ethiopia, you might like coffees from Kenya. But it's always great just to try a couple of options and see what fits your flavor profile.
Do you happen to know how many countries are represented with the coffee lineup that you currently have?
Yeah, right now we have coffees from 7 different unique countries. Because coffee is seasonal, we'll see that rotate throughout the year too. There's points in time where we might have 12 different coffees on the menu, but it only comes from 3 countries. There's other points in time where we might have 12 different coffees on our menu from 12 different countries. That's one of the things that's great. If you're looking for something new, all you have to do is wait a couple of weeks, and usually there's a new release on our website.
I've always been curious about that, so thank you for satisfying my curiosity.
Thanks a lot.
Paging Miles. Yeah, this is the principal's office. Miles Arbour, your mommy's here. Your mommy's here, Miles. Please come to the office. Miles, what's going on, dude?
Just hanging out in my kitchen in Powell River, British Columbia.
Man, it's good to see your face again, my friend.
It's always a pleasure to lay my eyes on yours as well.
Oh, that's so sweet. Well, it looks like you're going to be back on the podcast for the 3rd time. I'm excited to have you back on. I think that's a record I was thinking about. I think you'll be like the guest with the most appearances.
That's, it's an honor. You're doing a good thing with the podcast, and I just like to be consistent. So I'll just keep on coming.
Well, in the vein of consistency, I remember the first episode we ever did. You were at the beginning, you sang the intro song, and we did the interview, and you said, you know, if you're going to do a podcast, you want to see it through. You want to be there all the way from the beginning to the end. So in that vein, why don't you introduce today's episode?
All right. Today on the Bikes or Death podcast, we have myself, Miles Arbour, who works with bikepacking.com. He's going to be talking a little bit about a new big 1,000 kilometer gravel route on Vancouver Island that at the time of this recording isn't live yet, but at the time you're listening to it, it might be live. And it's going to be big.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. All right, man, that was a great intro. Why don't we have you take it away with the intro song?
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes or death. Bikes or death. Podcast.
Has anyone ever given you feedback saying that they don't want to hear it anymore?
No.
That's
the
good.
feedback on the song has been just awesome, really. I always get, and I share some of them with you. Just yesterday, the day before, it was some of my patrons. They went on a bikepacking trip and they did a whole video, you know, taking you along the trip, the whole thing. And at the end, they're all driving home in their car and they're listening to the Bikes for Death podcast and the intro song comes on and all four of them start singing and they're fucking, I mean, they nailed it, man. It's awesome. What was it? I sent that to you. Was that cool?
Oh, it was very cool. I like how everyone sings it like in their own tone as well. Like it's not, there's no consistency, which is great. Everyone puts their own little spin on it.
And everyone wants to. Even that guy sent me a message and said that they have like a heavy metal band. And so they're wanting to do their own rendition of it or something like that. So, and we've had other people that have taken their spin on it. And what did you think whenever, I actually was curious, like, did you have any expectation for it? Did you think I would use it all the time? Like, or do you just kind of just did it for fun? Like,
yeah, I just did it for fun. Emily and I were actually talking about this the other day, how like, it's funny how I just like wrote that to be funny. And then it seems like it's stuck. I'll come out with another version soon. I had some drafts in the work, but my Gitalele has a broken string right now and I haven't fixed it. I should probably do that. Maybe I'll do that today.
I think Bikes for Death should fund the new string. How much does a Gitalele string cost? Like $5? £5? What do y'all use there?
Who knows? I honestly have no idea how much it costs. Probably not a lot. But I feel like if I go into a music store, because there is one here in town, I bet if I go in there with my probably subpar Gitalele, they're going to try and sell me a nicer one. And I'm easily convinced.
So that's the real holdback. You don't want to, it's not the cost of the string that's holding you back. It's your own vulnerability to spend money on a nice, shiny new one.
Yeah, imagine the possibilities with a brand new Gitalele.
Well, I really can't. I didn't even imagine the possibilities of what was possible with the first one. And look at what you did. You started a worldwide sensation. I mean, people in the UK are fucking singing your song, driving down the road, coming home from a bikepacking trip, dude.
Is that where they were from, that crew?
I think, yeah, it was Wales, maybe. Maybe
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it's been cool, man. I really appreciate it. It's been such a fun part of the podcast that was totally I mean, that was a total surprise. I mean, you just did it and like, I'm going to play a song real quick in the back of my van. All right.
Glad to play a small part in the podcast.
I think it's becoming a big part. It's like you are synonymous with Bikes for Death at this point. You can't sever them. And no, nobody is wanting it to be severed. So let's just nip that in the bud right now, mister. People want more Miles Arbour, not less Miles Arbour.
I'm here. I'm giving them what they want.
Let's get into it. So since you are the man at pretty much the center of the bikepacking universe, let's get into some of the goings on in the bikepacking world real quick. Tell us your favorite piece of bikepacking gear. Favorite piece of gear?
I'm going to have to say these new CNC buckles from Oster. I think that's how you pronounce it. Manufacturing in just south of here in Washington.
What are they?
Where are they? Oh, I think I have one right here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little cam lock buckle that's CNC'd. So it's crazy beautiful. They look like little pieces of candy almost. They're so nicely finished and the CNC machining is so exact. It's just a cam lock buckle, but it's just not plastic. So CNC'd out of aluminum with a titanium pin. And I was sent a few to check out and we did a little article on them on bikepacking.com. Really, they hold tight. They hold tight and they're good for any weather. And they're just like, it's just a fun little conversation piece when I'm riding and someone's like, oh, what are those? And I'm just like, oh, get ready to your mind to be blown because these buckles are insane.
I love it. I remember the article and they're both cute and elegant at the same time. They're just super well designed. So take us through just a couple examples of how you would actually use that little cute clip. Little cutie. Do they call it the little cutie?
They should call it the little cutie. Because it's fall here in Powell River and it's getting kind of wet, I've been running a rear rack for most of my bikepacking setups, including this recent route scouting mission that I did. So I often lash like a big dry bag or not a big dry bag, but a dry bag. It's pretty small. On top of the rack for some extra gear, like with my tent and some stuff like that. And normally I would just use belay straps to strap those on, which are also a super handy tool. But the nice thing about these things is that they just like don't loosen up ever, and like they look cool, and they're handy if I need to use them for something else, because I can just count on these for sure.
That was my initial thought when I saw those is, well, okay, don't we have volley straps? And I want to ask you this question. The limitation of a volley strap is obviously the length. You get 18 inches, 25 inches, or whatever. That seems like you'd attach it to any length, webbed rope that you have, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and they're insanely strong. They're pretty much, they're infinitely adjustable, right? Because you're just looping it through the cam lock buckle, just how a cam buckle works.
On the inverse of that, there's no limit on the number of holes, right? Like if you need to make it super small, you could do that. Okay, cool. Worst piece of gear, something silly or just not good for bike packing. We're all bike packers here, Miles. Don't know if you know.
Wait, what? Backpacking?
I know you're into motorcycles now, so I just want
to. Worst piece of gear. I'm just trying to think.
You haven't had any gear break or anything? I'll tell you one while you're thinking. Do you know those big Agnes ultralight camp chairs? I got 2 of those, and within a year, both of them broke at the leg. Like the aluminum piece literally twisted, and it started to rip open. And no one sat in it other than me. I weigh 195 pounds. Like I'm not pushing the 250 limit that these claim, and I've treated them well. I was real nice to them. I think they probably make a great tent, but man, I'll tell you what, I don't know about those chairs. I had 2 of them, and it happened to both of them the exact same way. And I'm like, okay, 1 maybe, but 2, that's 100%.
I do have 2 pieces of gear that failed on me during this trip. So one was right before the trip, and I have these Smith glasses. They're my favorite sunglasses because they're photochromic, so they adjust to light conditions, which is pretty nice for bike packing. But right before my trip, when I was like packing my stuff up, I must have like sweat on them, and then my sweat stained the whatever kind of film there is on the inside of the glasses to the point like it doesn't come off. And you can't, I don't know. Yeah, see, you can see, those are warranty scratches, but you can see the rest of it. And it kind of looks like fogging on the glasses, and it won't go away. Thankfully, Smith is really good about warranties, coverages, so they're going to hook me up. But that was a weird one. The other one.
Can I ask a question about those glasses? Because photochromatic is something I've always been interested in. If you're riding from day to night, night to day, whatever, just having one pair of sunglasses. So how well did they actually work from that transition? Because I bought some of the cheaper ones, and the cheaper ones I've had don't work. Like the $30, $40 pair, the ones that they say they work, I haven't found any of those that work.
These were great. I've been super happy with them. They're kind of like, they're never going to be as clear as like well, that's not true. When they're clear, they're like totally clear. They'll never be as dark as like a total like actual like shaded sunglass, but they're pretty darn close. And they're what they do for me is I can just leave them on my head all the time. So like I don't have to take them off. Yeah, I've liked them. The only issue I've found here where it's like pretty humid and wet is that they fog up sometimes pretty easy. That's probably because like the fit is like pretty sporty, so they fit pretty close to my skin, like not a lot for a lot of ventilation.
I get that problem here with almost any sunglass. It gets so humid. I haven't found any of them that allow for enough ventilation.
Yeah, that's tricky. My other thing that failed was a tent pole that I had. The elastic in the inside broke on the first day.
Oh.
And then I had to tie a little knot. Well, I had to thread because it all fell apart. The tent pole fell apart. And then I had to put all the pieces back together and like hold and like pull tension in the elastic and like pinch it and then put a new piece on and then pull and pinch. It was pretty annoying. And then I had to tie a little knot in the elastic and shove it into one of the poles. So it worked. But a lot of these little ultralight pole sets for tents are, when you pack them up, and I've just kind of noticed it really, is that the elastic where it kind of bends when you between the different segments of the poles is like sometimes it's rubbing against sort of like a sharp edge of that pole. And because my poles, it's kind of it's really because I packed them in a silly spot, but I packed them in a bag that wasn't like a stuff sack, so it was kind of loose in there. So they were bouncing around all day. And I think that created enough vibration where it kind of like cut through one of them. So more of my fault than anyone else, but oh well.
Kind of, but I've seen that same, I know what you're talking about, where I think it rubs a little bit over time. It's probably a design feature that maybe tent manufacturers want to look into. What's next? What's your favorite bike packing tire? What did you use on the trip and how did it work? Maybe that one.
I used 700C by 50 mil Maxxis Ramblers. They're just the stock tires that came on the Husky Dogler that I rode. I've been a huge fan, and they work fine. They're like standard, like big volume gravel tire. They can hold up to a lot of stuff and like have enough traction for anything that I encountered. I've always been a big fan of WTB Ranger tires for bike packing. They're just like kind of like a good bet for most conditions. And I just got to mix things up a bit. I just got some Terravale. I just bought some Terravale A-lines from the bike shop here in town. And they look like they'll be great. They're a 29, I think it's a 29 2.5 inch tire. And they've got like pretty decent little side knobs, but like fairly fast rolling center tread for like mountain bikes. And I think I'm going to pair those with like a dynamo wheel set. So I think they'll be fast enough where it'll work well on like a dynamo wheel set.
Oh, I'm seeing them now. Yeah,
You see
that
those?
look like that looks like a good tire. I hadn't heard of those A-lines before.
Yeah, they look pretty neat.
It's like a Canadian A-line.
But here in Powell River, because it's so wet and chunky and there's roots and mud and rocks, I've been running like super chunky, like almost like downhill tires, like on my hardtail for sure, and a lot of the other bikes, just because you need the traction. Like you need like a super soft compound of rubber, so you have a lot of grip, that's not good for bike packing at all.
Yeah, I mean, actually, whenever you said you were running that 50 C tire, or isn't that what you said you had?
50 mil.
The Rambler?
Yeah.
The Rambler? Yeah. I was thinking that seemed like a little bit under biking for what I see you riding. But I guess you have some like really nice crushed granite roads, but like this route that you did, this 1,000 kilometer route, it was some pretty gnarly sections, right?
There were some short sections that were like pretty chunky and like some, I don't know, like golf ball to fist sized rocks that were like little short sections, but that wasn't the majority of the route. The majority of the route is gravel roads. So like pretty well-maintained gravel roads with, I don't know, pea-sized rocks.
Pea-sized gravel. Okay.
Yeah. So 50 mil for me was like kind of the sweet spot. You had totally enough traction to do any of the climbs as long as your gearing was right, and you could bomb down steep descents without like being too scared that you were going to wipe out.
Perfect. What are the best riding shorts that don't look like riding shorts? I need a new pair. That's why I'm asking. I tore mine.
I really like my chrome 5-pocket shorts. Let's see here. We just published, well, we didn't just publish, but a while ago we published a roundup of shorts, or maybe that was last summer. We just published the women's one. Madrona 5-pocket short.
I see them here. Chrome. Yep.
So those are the ones I wear on and off the bike most days, just because they're like a shorter inseam, so they're a little bit more comfortable, show off my legs a little bit, and they're not a technical feeling fabric. They're not a technical feeling fabric, so they're nice and comfortable against the skin, and they don't look like bike shorts at all. I'm trying to think of what other shorts I have.
I like those. I'll just get those. That's fine.
Okay, one answer.
Easy. It wasn't a trick question. Now here is a question. I think you are undisputedly the world's bikepacking poop champion. You probably have the most dialed poop system out of anyone I would expect. So take us through your poop system.
Yeah, so this is a good example. On this trip, I had a very sophisticated, right now in my Crohn's kind of journey. None of the medication is really working, so I'm onto a new medication. So I was in a weird kind of transition area where I wasn't really on any medication during this trip. So I knew I needed to have everything like dialed. So I had in my front handlebar bag, which was like a big Bags by Bird Piccolo. So we just did a review of that. It's big, like long flat style bag, well, short flat style bag. Actually, you just stuff things to the top. And in there, I had a Ziploc with toilet paper and baby wipes. And then in my frame bag, in the non-drive side, like map pocket, the little slim pocket, I had another Ziploc with toilet paper and baby wipes. Because, and do you know what? At some points during the day, I even had toilet paper in my hip pack as well. So I had a few different options. And I think that's important to me, because sometimes when I have to go to the washroom, I have kind of like 30 seconds to like figure out my stuff, dig a little hole somewhere if I'm not near a toilet, and like make something happen. So I also had my trowel in that little side pocket on my frame bag as well. And that was my system.
What kind of trowel do you use? Do you have a special trowel that you find will dig the fastest hole?
I have one of those little lightweight aluminum, I think Widefoot makes them, or maybe Widefoot sells them. There's a few different companies. I think one company makes them. I'm not too sure, but I know Widefoot sells a variation of them.
I know
little
which
aluminum
one.
You're
Talking about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty lightweight. Seems to work well.
I have a titanium one that obviously is super. Yeah. Matt Mason sent it to me as like a gift, and it's really lightweight. But if you're in rocky area, you're going to be struggling. I think that aluminum one you have is more durable. So we just had, I don't know if you had listened to the Quinn Brett episode yet, but it just came out like I guess like 2 days ago. But she's a paraplegic, paralyzed from the waist down, and she cannot feel if she needs to go to the bathroom. She also lost her sense of smell, and she can't smell if she's like shit herself. So do you know who I'm talking about? She's the girl who just completed the Tour Divide on the trike, an adaptive hand bike.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard of her.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, so she told us a pretty good poop story. You got any good bike packing poop stories you want to lay on us? Specifically shitting yourself poop stories.
Okay. Well, then it's actually not bike packing. I was kayaking, but it's close enough. It's pretty similar stuff. I was on a kayak trip in Ontario. When was this? This would have been a while ago, multiple years ago, back when I was in college. So just before the trip, we were kind of like, we would spend time at this like rafting place where we did a lot of it was like a guide training program. So we like spent a lot of time at this tour facility where we did a lot of our training for whitewater and kayaking and stuff. And then we're on this kayak trip, and it was 9 days, I believe, in total. About maybe day 3 or day 4, I started feeling like a little weird in my stomach. And I was like, oh, it's probably like a Crohn's related thing, because this was pretty early on in my Crohn's days. And then, so I was like, okay, just Crohn's, I guess. And then like I started having to go to the washroom a fair amount throughout the day. And I was like, I don't know if this is Crohn's. And then it started getting to the point where I had explosive diarrhea, to the point that it was shooting, no joke, like feet away from my body. And I ran out of toilet paper in like 24 hours. Not many, like there was some other people with toilet paper, but like no one really wanted to give it up, because it's kind of important. It's a rocky area too, like near Georgian Bay. So it was pretty rough. And then at one point I was just like, well, I'm not ever going to be able to like find enough toilet paper to like clean up. So I just started stripping down naked every time I went to the washroom and jumping into whatever body of water was nearby. It was just so awful. I was so dehydrated. And it turned out I caught cryptosporidium from, not actually from the trip, but from back like where we were doing our prep for the trip. And a few other people caught it too, but I don't think anyone had it. Maybe one other person had it during that trip. But yeah, a few of us actually ended up going to like the hospital and asking what was going on because we were hurting. It was bad. It was bad. Don't drink unpurified water or weird river water if you can avoid it.
Is that what caused? I haven't heard. It's crypto what?
Cryptosporidium. It's like I think people call it beaver fever and stuff. It's just like a nasty in the water that makes you super sick.
Yeah, sounds terrible. I've never been in one of those situations, but it's kind of one of your fears is that you're in the backcountry and you get dehydrated, food poisoning. I think food poisoning first that leads to dehydration is the real concern. I mean, that's you're fighting that, on top of just gross and dealing with the fact that you ran out of fucking toilet paper.
Yeah, and then it becomes about hygiene too, because then you're now like
especially if you're on a bike ride, man, and you're sitting on it. I mean, if you're kind of just sitting still in a kayak, I don't think quite as but if you're moving and you're opening up sores on your ass and you got shit everywhere, I can't imagine that's good.
No, it's definitely not, guys. I don't think it's recommended.
Not recommended. Man, this has been a good cautionary tale. I want to talk about your new fun project, your cargo bike. Is it an extra cycle, I think?
Yeah, the extra cycle edge runner.
I want a cargo bike so bad. So tell me what you got going on. When I saw yours, I was kind of jealous.
So a few weeks ago, we saw a Facebook Marketplace ad for some bikes for sale, and it was clearly like a backyard junk pile of bikes. Like all of them were rusty. None of them were really in good condition. But one of the bikes in that little lineup was the Extra Cycle Edge Runner cargo bike. When we bought it, it had a front wheel, handlebars. So like it had headset and stem and everything in there too. No crank, no rear wheel. It had the bags, the cargo bags, which is pretty important. And it had the top cargo platform as well. So this is like a long tail cargo bike, has a 26-inch wheel in the front, disc brakes, which is pretty sweet. And it runs a 20-inch wheel in the back to keep the load super low to the ground. Pulled them down to $75. So bought the frame for $75, which is pretty sweet. And then I cleaned it up and it sat around in my little shed for a week or two. And then when I got back from this route scouting trip, Justin and I at the bike shop went down to the bike shop one night and using pretty much all parts, like old parts from around the bike shop. I think I had to buy a chain ring. What else did I have to buy? A chain ring, 2 chains, because it's such a long wheelbase. You need 2 chains.
Oh, cool.
Maybe brake pads. I think brake pads. And then the rest of it was just parts from his parts bin collection. And it's rolling and it's beautiful.
So how much you got in it so far?
Well, I have some parts at my house too. So like really my own money that I put into it, it's like around $100. But I ended up putting on, we didn't have a shifter. So then I put on this Archer D1X wireless shifting kit. And then, so it has wireless shifting, which actually kind of makes sense for a cargo bike because the derailleur cable and housing has to be so long. And you have to have a weird cable to reach that far. So yeah, I have that. And I put like a basket in a front rack that I had on it that I had already. And I installed that. Came with a bell, so I didn't need a bell, which was nice.
I love it, man. I really, I'm so jealous. I mean, it's one thing because most people that have a cargo bike spent like a few $1,000s on them, but I'm jealous of the fact that you found that for $75. You got like $200 into it or whatever. It's sick, man.
It's pretty fun to ride. I thought it was going to be, I didn't really know what to expect because I've never ridden a bike like that, but it's great. It's rips around. I've been taking it on like some little gravel paths and trails, and I haven't picked up anything big with it yet, but I'm going to start doing, the idea is to start doing like some grocery shopping to try and lessen the amount of time we're driving our cargo van around. Just drive the cargo bike instead.
That's why I want one, is mostly for practical reasons. I have a buddy up in Idaho, Ash. Shout out Ash. Hey buddy. He was texting me this morning. Actually he's in New York now, but when I rode his cargo bike, we were up in Idaho and he let me take his big dummy, out for a ride. It was cold. I didn't like how cold it was because I drove in from Texas and it was freezing and windy and nasty. And I was like, I'm not ready for this, but the bike was fun. But the sucky part is just that they're so expensive. I haven't been able to find one I could afford. But it'd be so cool to be able to go grocery shopping or whatever, pick up a couch. I think you should pick up a couch. Just even if you see one on the side of the road, just put it on and take it around the block and put it back.
my friend Nathan here, who just moved to town, we're planning to do exactly that, like ride around and just like find big things to put onto it and take some photos because they're pretty useful. I think it's rated for like 400 pounds. The back of it. Wow. I'm pretty sure it's 400 pounds, which seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
Although maybe not this one because it's all rusty and dented.
There's only one way to find out.
Yeah, I'll find a 400-pound couch.
But if you have a bike like that, I can't imagine that you're not tempted to just see what it can do. I'd be throwing all kinds of things on there.
Yeah, I'm going to go bike packing with it for sure at some point.
Yeah, you take everything with you. Take a Dutch oven stove, take your your get-a-lele, sorry.
I could take a couple of friends on there if they just don't want to ride bikes.
Yeah, just take anybody. Oh, man. Did you see any of the comments about y'all? Bikepacking.com has been doing a bunch of tall biking lately, which is, I think, rad. I've been wanting to have the Zynga brothers on the show for a long time. They're just fucking awesome. I mean, anybody who doesn't know the Zynga brothers needs to look them up because they're all about their whole ethos and their whole like thing is about having fun and art and bikes, and they kind of combine all of them, and they do a lot of really cool stuff in a very unique way. But did you happen to see any of the comments, some of the hate on the tall bike hate?
No, I didn't.
No, I just saw some on because, like I said, I was interested in those, so I was kind of reading some of the comments, and people like, but why? And then there was these discussions like, well, they can carry more gear and all this stuff. And I'm just like, no, it's fun, man. It's fun. Like, why can't bikes just be fun? Like, why can't you just take a cargo bike packing in a ridiculous manner to be ridiculous and fun? That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just like, people, are always like whining over people's bike choices and stuff. And it's like, who cares?
That's exactly what it's like. Who fucking cares? It's so weird that people have opinions on what other people, and like they're mad. They're like, why? Why would you do that? Why? Like, why does it matter? Anyway, you ride your cargo bike, Miles. You do it any way you want. Okay. Kind of in that vein, though, does this trip represent, the type of riding you like to do, the places that you want to see, the, distances you want to go in a day, like, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, doggy?
I hear you, bro. I don't think it does represent totally like what I'm most interested in. What I'm most interested in is like single track, heavy, big backcountry views. So like Colorado Trail type stuff, South Chilcotins in British Columbia kind of stuff. I love getting up on top of big mountains and like just where you can see huge valleys below you is what I'm most interested in.
Me too, bro. In Texas, that's all I do. Big mountains, just epic scenery, valleys below. Yeah. You're speaking my language now.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
And I love riding on a mountain bike. Like I love just like even like a hardtail mountain bike with big plus size tires and like not loaded up super heavily if I can avoid it, and just having like fun, playful bike with epic single track terrain. But
Yeah.
I still like the other facets of bike packing.
Yeah.
So I'll go out on a big gravel ride for sure. And this 1,000-kilometer route that we're going to talk about shortly. It was all like you're sitting in the bike the entire time, like in your saddle, pedaling away, and you don't need a dropper post or any front suspension really, but still beautiful. I guess like an aspect that like relates to any kind of route. I love going into these like smaller towns and like talking with locals as well. I could like just have that experience and I would just be totally satisfied. Like I love rolling into a town, just being like, hey, just like striking up a conversation with, I don't know, the post office employee or like someone at the general store. And then usually they just have a story to tell you. And then it doesn't become about me and my bike trip at all. Like usually that's not what dominates the conversation at all. It's these locals that are just haven't shared their story with anybody because they haven't had the chance to really.
That's interesting. You should start a podcast where you interview them. Just let all these people tell their stories. It would be like kind of stories from bike packing, but not about bike packing. It's about like the people that you meet, or you can just keep it to yourself and it can be a nice thing that you like to enjoy on your trips. But yeah, it's cute. I like it. It's a good answer. Going back to your story, it's very relatable to me. I genuinely love people and I love interacting with people, especially in small towns. My route that I'm doing, I intentionally avoided any big major city centers. I tried the smallest little communities possible. And, you know, like there's one little grocery store, Van's Grocery. You got to go see Van. And, you know, I went in there and like talked to the lady behind the counter and told her about this bike race that would be coming through. And, you know, she thought it was motorcycles. And we just talked, you know, about, you know, that place had been there over 100 years or something like that. And it's fun just to have those little interactions, you know, and peek into the lives of other people a little bit.
Totally. And I think while bike packing is like gaining popularity in sort of like the cycling world and like outdoor enthusiasts are like learning about it, it's still like very unknown in like everyone else's lives. Like you can't expect to roll into these towns and people to know what you're doing. So I think it's always, and I love the point where like you mentioned it, where like someone's like, oh, so you're on like motorbikes, or like, oh, so you're like on the paved roads the entire time, or like, and you're like, oh, just you wait.
You're like nonchalantly like, no, you know, the town over there. Mm-hmm. Well, because you'll say I rode from the town over there. They're like, oh, so down I-45 or whatever. You're like, no, I went through this pass and that pass and over that mountain and all this. Like, wait, what?
And that's actually the route that I did. It's a good example of that because at one point you have to take a water taxi, like a boat through the ocean. And so you say like, oh, I came from Tassus, the town of Tassus. And they're like, oh, like, so like, what? Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, when I went to, so this race and route and everything, by the way, I meant to tell you or email you, but I'm wanting to publish once it's done, the route's done, but once everybody rides it and we get all the feedback and hopefully even make it a little bit better, or they, you know, maybe they just say it's terrible, or maybe they just say it's really good, but we get some feedback, and then I'd like to publish it because I think like the 275 mile showcasing the best of East Texas, it's really, really good, you know? But so the whole thing starts and finishes at the Bullet Grill where we ate whenever you came down, remember? I got to know the owner, and he's actually a really cool guy. He always wanted to be a chef. He had a whole nother career, and then, you know, kind of retired. And this is like his dream is to open up like a bar and grill in the middle of the woods. And I'm like, cool, that's your thing, you know? And, but he's been super helpful. But anyway, like I remember the first time I went to him, I mean, I had to come with like pictures and stuff. It's like, here's a map, here's some pictures. This is what we're thinking. And, you have to help like wrap their mind around it before you can actually get them to actually have the conversation. I can't just walk in and be like, hey, we want to host a bikepacking event and this is going to be the main hub. And he'll be like, oh yeah, that's cool. We do that all the time.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. It's, you have to tread lightly with this kind of stuff. And like, to some people, it might sound like rambunctious or like it's going to be a bunch of people that are like littering and shitting all over the place. But, well, there's probably some people out there doing that, but most of us are pretty well-mannered.
I think by and large, you're right. And that's another thing that we talked about as well, actually, was just like the types of people that do this kind of stuff. It sounds crazy, but, in our world, it's not that crazy. And it's just riding your bike every day, It's much simpler than what most people's lives, certainly simpler than what my daily life is. My daily life is it's crazy. Let's talk about your route, man. Let's do it. Are you ready? You're ready. We don't know what we're going to call it. We don't have a name. It's probably going to come out soon as to the release of this podcast. It may be out now. It may be out soon. Yeah. Why don't you just first give us the stats?
Yeah. So I'll give you some stats. Let me just open it up here actually, so I can just pull it right from here. Right now, the route is just over 1,000 kilometers. It's located on like the north end of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, which is kind of like north of Courtenay Comox, if anyone, for the British Columbia folk that know where that is. It's about 90% gravel, maybe closer to 85% gravel. And then the rest is a little bit of pavement, a very small portion of highway riding on the side of a nice highway. And there's a little bit of trails kind of mixed in there, but it's gravel roads on Forest Service roads primarily.
How do you get the percentages of gravel to pavement? Are you keeping track of that as you go along? Or you do it off satellite view? What's your process there?
So in the past, I would just go back over the route on Ride GPS, which is what I use to plan all my routes with on my computer. And I would kind of like highlight sections that I knew. In this case, I would like highlight pavement sections because there was not a lot of it, and then find like a kilometers and then find the percentage. Now, Ride GPS just did an update. So they give you a percentage of unpaved, which is pretty cool. So it does that automatically right on the route page, but it's not like 100% accurate. And in some cases, it's like way off. So
I was going to say, in some cases, only 3% accurate.
So it was, it was actually pretty accurate for this route. This route, I think it was saying 85%.
Yeah, that was my joke, because for my route, it says it's 3% gravel or unpaved or whatever. And not throwing shade on Ride with GPS. I knew that feature was coming. We talked about it on the podcast before. And I think the cool thing about it, though, is it allows locals to go in and actually mark where the gravel actually is. And then it becomes a resource for everybody. It's simply like open sourcing what's paved, what's unpaved. And so it's going to be accurate in some places, not accurate in others, but we can go in and tell the computer what it actually is.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just a step in the right direction to make it a little bit easier when you're planning.
It'll get better like anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And then like in routes where there's like single track and stuff, I'll do the same. I'll just like kind of highlight, or if it's like a shorter route, it's sometimes a little bit easier just to like give a kind of like a well-educated estimate.
Okay. Well, that's exactly what I do. I highlight and then just change the color of that section. And then I just calculate the percentages while I'm going along. I do some of it from satellite view and some of it I do like as I'm going along. So routes is always a very hot topic. Everybody likes to talk about routes. So tell us, like, do you have, or specific to this one, did you have goals in mind, priorities? Like, what was your approach to even starting a route like this?
Yeah. So I'll go like way back because I hadn't really experienced much of like the North Island, so north of Courtenay, Comox, or Campbell River area. So how did I figure it? So really, I've just been like, I started looking at resources for around the island. There's a few people that have, there's a website, Backroads, what is it called? Backroads Bike Touring, which is a gentleman that has ridden all over Vancouver Island to the Sunshine Coast and has a lot of the roads marked. And like, so I was looking at that. I was asking people that had ridden up there a bunch. And then there was like this overlanding kind of like off-road ATV route that was published that uses some of those trails up there. So I was using kind of some of their resources and chatting to that kind of crew about what they were doing. The cool thing about the North Island is that although there's tons of gravel roads everywhere, like tons of Forest Service roads, if you're looking to connect communities together in a way that makes sense, it's pretty obvious what loop you're going to do. Like as long as you spend the time, like still takes a long time. Like it took a bunch of research, and then it took me 13 days to go ride it and like dial in everything. But like there's an obvious loop that you want to do that could be expanded into like a 30-day plus trip if you wanted to. But as it is, it's kind of like the best of the best. In terms of, you asked like if there was anything that, like certain things that I wanted to like kind of accomplish with the route.
Yeah, like what's the purpose of the route? You know, what niche is it filling? Like why do it, you know? It's a lot of work. That's the thing that I'm starting to respect a lot more is doing this route is these longer routes are pretty difficult to actually create that is good, has the resources, you know, it goes. So you have to have like a pretty good reason for making or putting in all that time.
I think it's because the Vancouver Island and the northern half in general is not a lot of people have experienced that by bike. So it's like, it's kind of this like sort of, at least in BC, I kind of get the vibe that it's sort of like this mysterious little area that like some people drive up there to go like do big hiking trips. There's a lot of big hiking trails up there, but there's a lot of smaller towns, especially on the west side of the island that people kind of drive into, but there's not a lot of people like biking around that area. I had no idea what to expect. I knew the route like really well because I spent a lot of time planning it out and dialing in everything as much as I could before I got there myself. But I had no idea really like what the landscapes or terrain was going to be like. And let me tell you, I was blown away.
By how pretty it is, how hard it is, how remote, like what was blowing you away?
It was so gorgeous. The terrain, I didn't expect there to be so many like big mountains. There's like big granite mountains with like snow still on them and huge lakes like around every corner. And then all of a sudden you're climbing up to views of like the ocean and then the Johnstone Strait to the east and like all these kind of like coastal islands and inlets and fjords. It was unreal. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been so excited about gravel riding before.
That's awesome. I mean, I wanted to ask you, like, are there any ugly parts of Canada? Because all the pictures you post, everything I see mostly through you and some other cyclists that I follow, it's stunning. And it has a diversity that is like a robust diversity of everything you could imagine.
Yeah, it packs in a lot, especially British Columbia. Like you can be in deserts and stuff in Kelowna and the interior, and then you're in rainforests on the coast, and then huge mountain ranges. Yeah, it's super diverse. Like I'd be lying if I said it wasn't super beautiful, and I was very inspired by it.
I can't imagine living in a place like that and, you know, being who you are and having the capability to hop on your bike and literally just go explore. I can't imagine that ever gets old.
No, it's always fun. But I always seem to find reasons to leave as well. So the world is just too big of a place.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Speaking of that, I was going to ask you, like, what is this situation with the border? I know it opened for a little while, and that I think I heard it closed, but I mean, not everybody that listens is in Canada. So can people even access this route now, or what?
Well, U.S. residents can come to Canada, so you guys are allowed to come up here, no problem. For me to go into the States, it's like a big process where I think I have to get like a pay for a COVID test and then when I leave and maybe when I arrive or something, and then pay again when I leave. It's just, I was looking into it actually at one point, and it ended up not being worth it. It's confusing. I have no idea why it's open for you guys, but not for us.
Yeah, that sounds really weird.
I don't know. Yeah.
It sounds so backwards. Sounds very nice though. And Canadians are just being nice. They're just like, okay, you want in that bad. It's fine. You can come.
Yeah. But the situation isn't good. Like COVID cases are on the rise, and people just like everybody, and just like you and I, like we're all very tired of it. But I think it would be it's premature for us to think that it's on the way out, because it definitely isn't, from what I've seen at least.
Pretty sure it's on the rise. We're not talking flat earth theory here. I mean, I think it's on the rise. Yeah,
it's happening.
We have negative COVID test requirements for the showdown. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the cool thing now with everything going on. I think testing should just be more like the norm until COVID is not, is gone or whatever the fuck happens with it. But like I saw Mid-South posted today that they're going to do negative COVID tests for theirs. And I mean, it's free, it's easy. And so it's like, why not just go get one and make sure you're not going to go to an event where there's 100 people and you're just going to cough on everyone, So yeah. Anyway,
I agree.
Yeah, there's that. Let's talk about COVID like a lot more. That's what I came to talk about. What I want to know is, again, from a planning aspect. So you talked a little bit about the resources that you use, where you gathered information from, but then what? Now you've got this information, you got to start building it and ride with GPS, campsites. What are you looking for when you're actually building the route and trying to make a good route?
So pretty much I start off, I guess, like I kind of like a triage, like what's important. So like first off is like the towns along the route are super important to add in there, because I want to know like where there's sort of like some infrastructure. And then I start looking at what's in each of those towns and break it down and start making calls and shooting emails out to see what's actually open. The tricky thing with this route in particular is that a lot of these small towns have kind of like outdated Google like businesses and stuff, and like the hours aren't right, and like sometimes there's just like no grocery store at all, even though there says there's a grocery store. So I got pretty into it and like emailing people and like joining like community Facebook pages and like asking people what's up.
That's really smart.
Yeah. So I joined like actually just this morning I posted in this there's Facets, which is this very small town on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And that's where you have to catch the boat to go to the next kind of portion of the route. And I'm in like the Facets community Facebook group, which is like pretty small, but very active. And I've been asking questions in there, and everyone's super excited and like just answers my questions right away.
That's a great idea. I'd never considered. I mean, even route baiting, like if you want a question about a road or something, yeah, the locals will know.
Oh yeah. And I don't know if it's not everywhere in the world's like this, but like in Canada, at least there's like tons of Facebook groups for like communities and buy and sell pages. And like, maybe it's like that everywhere.
I think that it's everywhere. Yeah, I think it's everywhere. So your triage is towns, resupply, obviously. Yeah.
And then really after that, you're kind of just looking at points of interest. So like the big thing, like I think for a well-designed route, there should be interesting stuff along the way, whether it's like cultural or like historical or even just like nature related. So I started just adding in all the cool things along the way.
So points of interest. What about like camping spots? Is it all like national forest and so it's open, or what?
No, so a lot of it is actually privately owned logging land. There's a bunch of big companies on Vancouver Island that looks, but I'm pretty sure they like own it. So you can't just necessarily go camping wherever you want. The good thing is that there's tons of BC recreation sites, which are like kind of like government owned, like rustic campgrounds that are usually free or like maybe $10 or something along the route. So there's tons of really nice camp spots. You don't really have to wild camp. unless you really need to in a certain situation. But there's usually picnic tables and outhouses, and they're often on a lake. So like on a summer, if you're riding this route in the summer, you can be swimming pretty much every day for sure, actually, if you wanted to. And then that's pretty much it, really. Towns, points of interest, resupply, camping. What else do you need?
I was going to ask you if you scouted. I thought you might have even scouted portions of it on your motorcycle, but it sounds like you did this trip that you just did was your scouting of this route.
Yeah, so I rode the whole route. I like to do enough research in advance that like I'm pretty sure, like I'm 95% sure like what I'm riding is going to be the final route. But you have to get like down there and see it for yourself, because some things aren't as good as they look like from your home. And then Emily and I actually did a road trip in the van up to the North Island a few weeks before I did the trip as well. So we drove all the way up to Port Hardy, which is kind of like at the northern tip of the route. And I took that opportunity to like check around as well to see like what was in the towns and started getting some information then. And then, and the rest of it was just during my ride, 13 days out there.
Were you 95% sure then going into this one that it was going to go?
Yeah, I was pretty confident with everything. Like I had the boat taxi, the water taxi all planned out already, because there was another group actually bikepacking out there. So we like joined on their boat ride from Tassus to Zeballos. And then the rest of it, like it follows such, although they're not like super popular roads, like not many people are driving on these roads, and there's not a whole lot going on them besides like logging once in a while. It's pretty like easy to know that like you can ride them and like where they end up. Like we're not really going down any weird dead end roads or anything. Yeah, I was pretty confident and it worked out pretty well.
So talk about that, the boat ferry thing a little bit. Is that like a crux of the trip? What's going on?
Yeah. So although these places aren't going to mean anything to you, they'll mean something to our Canadian listeners. So you leave from Comox, Courtney area, which is, I started the route from there because the ferry, you have ferry access from the Sunshine Coast where I am in Powell River. And then you can also get there with public transit from like Victoria and also from the mainland from Vancouver. So it's a pretty good spot to start the route that isn't too far north on the island yet. And then from there, you kind of go north and then head all the way west to the west side of Vancouver Island to this small town of Gold River. And then that's kind of like where the real adventure begins. And when like you start getting super gorgeous views, and you head to North Tassus, which is only accessed from Gold River. So once you get to Tassus, if you want to go to Tassus, you have to take a boat or a plane to continue without backtracking like a big section.
So how far is the boat ride?
It's not that far. I think it was 45 minutes or so. I don't know what the distance is, but you kind of like leave this big inlet off the west side of Vancouver Island and then go around through another inlet back up to Zeballos. And we saw whales. It was gorgeous. I think they were humpback whales. The cool thing is that the towns of Tassus and Zeballos are actually planning a trail to connect the two. That'll be a multi-use trail. So that'll make it so much easier, because the boat ride, it's kind of expensive if you don't have a big group to split it with.
How much is it?
So we paid $400, but we split it 8 ways. So it was only $50 a person.
It's $400 for what? The amount of space you're going to take up? Because it's obviously not per person. So like, how do they come to that number?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably
sounds like they pulled it out of their ass. They're like, you got 8 bikes, 8 people. Yeah, it's $400.
Yeah, probably. It's pretty like there's not a lot going on up there. But kayaking and hiking is huge. And a lot of these companies will do like shuttles for kayak trips and hiking trips. Like they do this. Like this is like some of their business is just like water taxi service.
I gotcha.
So they know what they're in.
So they're used to people hopping on with different, whatevers to get wherever they're going.
Totally, yeah. So I think
just a day in the life.
Yeah, the issue right now is that, at least for some of the companies I spoke to, is that like they don't have a lot of employees. It's hard to get people to move there to run these businesses. So in our situation, the actually owner of the company like drove us in the boat up because he was like looking to hire somebody. He just couldn't find anybody, which I'm sure is like affected by COVID and everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there's a big hiring shortage, it seems, in the US too.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than the cost, it sounds kind of fun, to just like break up the trip. Just kind of a fun thing to do. You'll get to talk to the guy. You need a sandwich or whatever on the boat trip and just kind of see a whale, whatever.
Yeah. Honestly, it was one of the highlights of the trip for me because the town of Tassus, the grocery store, well, the general store was like, didn't have much in it, like a few dry goods. They were actually, it was interesting. They were waiting for a shipment. Probably, I'm not too sure if it's a boat or a truck that comes in there with their goods, probably a truck, but they didn't have their shipment yet. So like they didn't have a lot of stuff in the store. So like that impacted what we could buy because we were catching a boat to leave. And then there's a cute little family-owned restaurant, like right at the marina where we were catching the boat. So we all hung out there and had some lunch and stuff before we caught the boat. And then when we got to Zabalis after the boat ride, the general store there that we thought was better wasn't even open. So like you just have to roll the punches.
Yeah, you do. Well, that's a great segue, Miles. You're so good at this. My next question was going to be about how you packed and prepared for, this trip. You'd never done it. So, you didn't know how long it was going to take you. You didn't know how long exactly it would get you to resupply points, if they would be open. So I'm curious, like what your approach to that was. And then kind of, I guess in that vein would be like, did anything go wrong and what happened?
So from like a food and resupply standpoint, I kind of like budgeted to carry, well, not budgeted, I just planned to carry like sort of 2.5 days of food on me at all times. So I had room left in my handlebar bag and my frame bag and some in my little panniers because I was running panniers as well to have like food. So I had like meals and like lunchy, snacky things and like a bunch of snacks and breakfasts pre-made for 2.5 days. At the beginning, I probably actually left with closer to like 3 days worth of food. And that's like, so that kind of made sense. Looking at the distances and elevation, I was pretty sure we were going to be able to do it in like 10 to a little bit more than 10 days. So, and then looking at like resupply points and stuff, which were definitely like worked into like our schedule because we kind of like wanted to get, like, it's just easier if you don't have to carry more food. So we sort of worked it into the schedule to be like that. And then it ended up being, we were doing pretty good days, and it ended up being that we could have carried less food, but it could have also gone sideways because a lot of the stores in like, especially on the West Coast side of things, the more remote communities, some of their stores just like closed down for the winter. So we could have easily had to carry like even 4+ days worth of food if you were trying to do this route like in a month from now. If it wasn't, So, but it worked out well for us. We didn't have any issues with resupply besides the surprise that some of these stores didn't have a whole lot to offer. But I'm not picky when I'm like hungry out there. Like I'll eat a can of mystery if I need to.
You do what you got to do.
I'm okay with chocolate bars and stuff. My riding partner, Peter, he was vegan, so it was a little bit trickier for him. But
you said he was vegan. He was vegan before the trip. Now he's not.
So it was actually funny because he would always come out of, when we had like good resupply points, he would always come out with like fresh vegetables and like hummus and stuff. And I would come out with like bag of cookies and like Snickers bars. And I'd be like, oh, you're onto something here, Peter. And then in terms of like how I packed.
You mentioned earlier that you sounded a little bit surprised by the snow. So that also made me wonder, how you packed for different weather that you would encounter.
It's another thing that makes the route so tricky is because the weather on Vancouver Island is like all over the place and like pretty hard to predict. It's also the best time to ride the route is in the spring and fall. And we rode it in the fall and it gets pretty rainy. Like you can expect a lot of precipitation. So you have to bring a lot of stuff because it can get cold at night. It was probably getting down to around 10 degrees Celsius, which is like not too far above freezing. So I carried a lot of stuff. Like I had two micro panniers that I had with like, I had a puffy and like pretty like cold weather rated sleeping bag. I brought a full 1-person tent. Not a lot of changes of clothing, but like a fair amount of layers, different layers and stuff to keep me warm. I brought full rain gear, so like full waterproof jacket and pants, as well as like vapor barrier socks to keep my feet dry.
What specific rain gear do you use?
This time around, I was using some 7 mesh. It was a 7 mesh co-pilot jacket and 7 mesh thunder pants, which are like their full waterproof riding pants. And that was a good combination. I could have used a heavier duty rain jacket for sure. That's like their packable. I think it's a 2.5 layer shell. And because it's still like hot during the days, but like we had days where it was like mild and pouring rain. So if you kind of need vents and stuff, and that jacket doesn't have a lot of vents. So, and because it was raining all day long, which is like going to be pretty hard on any rain jacket. It doesn't matter how good it is. It's like, eventually it's going to get wet.
Yeah. Waterproof after a period of time isn't waterproof anymore. I don't care if you're riding 8 hours in rain, you're just going to get wet.
And we had 2 days in a row where it was pretty much like that all day long, and like at times pretty heavy, but I was pretty comfortable. Like, yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Do you wear wool then?
Yeah.
My go-to is wool.
Yeah. I pretty much only wool socks. I think I had a wool t-shirt, and I had some wool underwear as well, actually.
I got the Ridge ones, I think, because of you.
Yeah.
Is that what you use?
Yeah, I still use those.
Yeah, that's what I've been using. Great recommendation for undies. They should sponsor us.
Actually, for this trip, I brought, for the first time in a long time, I wore a chamois.
Oh, yeah. What you wear?
I wore a 7 mesh one. They have like a little packable, like lightweight chamois. And it really, there's nothing much to it. It's like just a little bit of comfort. But I knew I was going to be like sitting for a long time, like not mountain biking where you're getting off your saddle a lot. So I was like, I feel like I should have a little bit of extra something. And I'm happy I did. And I was able to like wash it at night and it would dry out by the morning, which was it was quite wonderful.
Man, they were looking at sponsoring the show for a little while, and you're making me I need to send them an email and just touch base. Be like, hey, I want to go see what's up. I know they make some good stuff just based on what I've like read online, but you're making me want to really try.
They're a good company. They're based out of British Columbia. They're super in tune with Indigenous land acknowledgement, and like the name 7 Mesh is based off of the Indigenous name for the area that it's based out of. And they put their money where their mouth is too, and like have donated a lot of good money. And they make really good gear. So I'm a fan for sure.
Yeah, whenever they reached out to me, I started, because I didn't know a lot about them, so I started researching them, and I legitimately, because that's part of it, is like I want to partner with companies that I actually like and want to tell people about, and like you just did, it's something you naturally want to share because it's like, oh, they make a good product and it's a good company, that's good, that's what you want, do something good with all that money. Make some good chamois, for God's sake.
Come on.
That's all what the people want.
That's all we want.
and don't be assholes.
Just padded underwear.
Let's see. Anything else from... I'm almost getting this sense that... And speak to this, but that you might want to pack a little heavier on this route for people who are going to be going and doing it. Depending on the time of